panelists, Manvendra Singh Shekhawat. Manvendra has, welcome Manvendra. Manvendra has forged alliances with local communities to address systemic problems and has undertaken over 35 community projects, including JSM's largest cleanliness and conservation drive. His sandbox project, Dhun, is a regenerative habitat for 8,500 people. His team transformed 500 acres of barren land into a thriving ecosphere. They are now building an ecosystem of creative enterprises that leverages culture, nature, creativity, and technology to create a new development narrative. So we'd like to learn more about that from you today, Manvendra. Thank you for joining us. We also welcome Madhav Pai. Madhav Pai is a respected thinker-practitioner who has been working on issues of urbanization, climate change, and environment issues in various countries over the last few decades. Under his leadership as Executive Director of WRI and Director of Embark India, the team has supported implementation of several pioneering projects, including Indore BRT, the Mumbai Climate Action Plan, and the Ragiri campaign for democratizing public streets, and the National Electric Bus Program. We welcome you, Madhav, and I'm sure you have a lot to contribute to this panel, given your experience and expertise. And lastly, Mr. Jamshyd Godrej. Mr. Jamshyd Godrej is the chairman of the board of Godrej Boyce Manufacturing Company Limited. He's also the chairperson of the board of directors of Shakti Sustainable Energy Foundation, India Resources Trust, and Council of Energy, Environment, and Water. He is also the chairman of the CII Saurabhji Godrej Green Business Center, housed in a LEED Platinum demonstration building, which is the first green building in India and the greenest building in the world at the time when it was rated. Thank you so much for joining us today, Mr. Godrej. And to moderate this discussion, we have Ms. Faye D'Souza. Faye D'Souza is a multi-award winning journalist who has gained immense popularity for a balanced and unbiased style of journalism. She's been a recipient of several awards for her journalism, including the Ramnath Goenka Award for Excellence in Journalism and the Red Ink Award for Journalist of the Year in 2018, and the award for reporting on health during the pandemic in 2021, which was very well covered and very well researched, if I may add. She launched her news app called Beetroot News with the aim to innovate with formats and restore dignity and credibility to audiovisual news. And we couldn't think of a better person to moderate this with unbiased. So thank you so much for joining us today, and please take it away. Thank you.
Good afternoon, and thank you for having me. Thank you for that introduction. It's a pleasure to be here and to have this conversation. I would normally start a panel discussion talking about how it's a good time to have this conversation, but I think that was 10 years ago. It's about time we had this conversation. The word sustainability has sort of become this liberally applied umbrella term at this point for anything that's even slightly environment conscious. Sustainable clothes, sustainable shoes, sustainable food, sustainable, we're just sort of slapping it on at, without fully understanding it. The purpose of this conversation is to understand how we can make sustainability sustainable, which means that it's not just applied to some part of our business or some part of our life or some part of our communities, but it's actually something that we can ingrain with the help of the private sector, with the help of government, with the help of families, that becomes just every day and doesn't fall off the wagon as all of us get busy and move on with our lives. Research shows us that there are 6% of India's companies right now that just don't do anything at all because they just don't feel it to be necessary. And so there is this need, obviously, for regulation to push on one side, for citizens to push on the other side, and maybe for corporates to feel more responsible. But the idea here is to find out how we can collectively change things to a point where we just don't continue to talk, and we're actually starting to see change. If I may start with you, Mr. Godrej, and the idea of, sort of big corporates, large manufacturing. the push that's needed to take it past social responsibility and into everyday work, where it becomes, building sustainable spaces, sustainable factories, reducing the amount of waste of energy, the amount of actual waste created, becomes just the way everybody lives in corporate India. How far away are we right now, and what is it going to take, in your opinion?
Thank you. First of all, let me say that I do agree with you that sustainability is to some extent a sort of a general catchword, and we do have to be more specific about it. But the main point is that for companies, it is, a variety of influences that drive any action. I think there's voluntary action, there's with regulation, and there is, pressure from customers, suppliers, general society. So there are a variety of influences. I think for companies, the main point is that by embracing these issues, you can become more efficient, you can save cost, you can connect with your employees better, you can be able to attract people who are interested in the subject. So there are many, many good reasons for companies to do it. And I don't know where you get your statistics about 6%, but I think so. No, the point really is that, you have to look at India and Indian industry, that 90% of the units in India are small and medium size, So if we are only talking of the 10% units which are large units, they are probably all doing something, But the challenge will be, how do you spread it? How do you take it down the line? I mean, some of the experiences we have through CII and WRI and others is essentially that, when you're able to help people in this journey, I think you find that there's a lot of buy-in, and people want to do it because they see the benefit of it. So, I mean, from a large, broad angle, it's the voluntary action is very important. I think people have to feel, companies must feel that yes, there is a good reason for them to do it. And then, of course, there's regulation and everything else that comes in, standards that come in, So, yeah.
So when you say that there's 90% of India's units are small and medium, and they're perhaps not doing much, is that because the information that it's actually good for business has not reached them, or the intel on how to make it happen and make that change within those organizations has not reached them? Where is that gap?
It's a complex issue. I think the first part of that is that there has to be hand-holding. The second part is there's a reluctance because they feel it would then add to their costs and complexity, and they're not ready to do that. So the way it works best is to manage your supply chain. So every company has a supply chain. And if you use the 80-20 rule, which is that, you get 80% value from 20% of the units, and you work with those 20% units individually, each one of them in your supply chain, to bring them around, to make them understand the issues, why you want them to do it. And it can easily be done. We've done it in many of our supply chains. And it's not difficult to do, actually. There's a lot of interest from these units, all your supply units, to be sort of compliant, but they have to be held, over time. It's a journey which takes some years. It's not something that happens. So if you have that long-term commitment, you can do it.
And I'll come back to where that commitment is going to come from, but I want to bring in Madhav here. When we talk about our cities and the way we use energy and the way we will talk about how we can involve community, but is there enough political intent and regulatory push to be able to do this all the way down the line. Because like in corporates, even within our cities, a large number of people are urban poor, who are not catered to when it comes to the adequate use of energy, to conservation of energy, management of waste, even when we're talking about transport, all of these categories, we wind up sort of addressing the top 15% and not the rest of it. How do we fix that?
See, one simple thing, today we are actually in a unique time in India, right? I mean, the amount of money we are investing in building urban infrastructure is unprecedented. So, also this is a time of rapid growth. Now, this is the opportunity for us to do things better, right? I mean, there were a couple of conversations. I'll give you two examples, like the air pollution problem, right? We all know air pollution is a serious issue in Mumbai. Today, there are 13,000 private building sites in Mumbai. Simple things that, if you go and ask a builder saying you have to wash the tires every time a truck goes in and out, there's not a single good product in the market that washes the tires. That lasts 5 years. If you say you have to do cutting indoors, there is not a mask that is there. And what I'm trying to say is that capacity in the whole system. You don't have a person, we don't have 10 PhDs, this is one end. We don't have 10 PhDs that actually are able to do atmospheric modeling to figure out how to deal with the meteorological conditions that Mumbai faces. So you see, there's a whole paucity of almost capability and in the ecosystem. And the big opportunity is how do we bring the knowledge, how do we build the science to both understand the problems better and then solve them practically. And government in a way is doing it, but that capacity is not there. So now the opportunity for us is this 300 billion. Now I always talk about the idea of this dividend, right? What are the few elements of sustainability that we can put into every single project that we are doing? And same conversation you talked with Mumbai Municipal Corporation. This year, let's maybe do some sort of a challenge, of accelerator program with all the builders and identify the 30 things they can do. Right? Next year, bring the regulation. The third year gets changed. So I think this positive intent of slowly doing this hand-holding point that Mr. Godrej also made, how do we bring people along? Because there is money, right? Today, if you go to Africa or even Latin America, there is no money, actually. Now we have this large capital flowing in our ecosystem. How do we make sure that, there is enough understanding of what the opportunities are? And then how do we sort of start tackling them one by one?
And everything we're building currently needs to be future safe in some way.
70% of our buildings are not built, right? I mean, that we need in India. I mean, we've seen, the whole opportunity. Again, we talked about climate, we talked about heat, right? I mean, we know now that the amount of energy India is going to need for cooling is as much as all the energy we consume today in another 10 years. Because, we are going to, half the year people are going to be in temperatures that are not conducive. From a business perspective, your productivity, the Surat diamond workers, this is a story, Surat diamond workers realized that the productivity of their workers were dropping every afternoon. They worked with the city to they changed the times. The afternoons became off times. They worked with the city. They rearranged public transport times. So they work from 7 to 11 and 3 to 7 because they realize that the productivity of the workers. So I think this is where I think we have to look at the win-win. We have to look at, how we can generate sort of dividend from every investment that we make. And so the opportunity is huge at the moment. And I think there's lots we can do to literally make almost every action we take, whether it's on air pollution, whether it's on heat, whether it's on managing flooding in Mumbai, all of that, to drive this.
It's interesting you brought up washing of the trucks and then the flooding in Mumbai. I've been a journalist for some time now. We used to talk about flooding in Mumbai, air pollution in Delhi. Now we're talking about flooding in Chennai, in Hyderabad, in Bangalore. We're talking about air pollution in Mumbai. I wake up every morning and look out of the window and decide whether or not I want to let that air into my house. And we've sort of reached, there is no one you will find in this city who thinks that that's okay, including government. But we simply don't seem to be able to collectively do something about it. There's a dropping of our shoulders saying, oh, we're just going to go the Delhi way and there's nothing we can do about it. And that's a question I'm going to bring to you, is how do we manage to pull community together? And by community, I mean everyone. Corporates, public sector, government, citizens, schools, to solve problems actively, because it's, the person who introduced you called it a sandbox project, and the good part about a sandbox project is there'll be learnings that we can apply to bigger cities. What are those learnings?
Thank you. So I come from, I was very fortunate to have spent the earlier part of my life working on a project in Jaisalmer. And all the issues that we talk about of extreme heat in specific, the paucity of resources, all of them get amplified in the desert. So in a region that the world writes off as a desert, how is it that the people, using their will and enterprise, have been able to turn the meager offerings of nature and turn it into an extraordinary wealth of culture, heritage, and have called it home for the past 2,000 years? There's certainly something to learn from them and from indigenous communities around the world. And if I was to say an attempt to bring that entire essence in one line, is generational thinking, frugal and agile systems coded in culture. That's really the formula that seemed to have worked for them. And so you spoke about how to bring communities together. I think communities is what the cultural milieu that you set in a place herds entire communities to behave in certain ways, and that behavioral change on that mass scale really moves the needle. So I'll give you a small example, anecdotal example, which is that one of my cousin got married in Jaisalmer, and when we went to his, the house where he was getting married, they asked him a simple question that, where is your nose? It's like a rather odd question, where is your nose means what? So they said that, he said that this is my nose. And the girls, they started laughing. And I wanted to probe more. So when someone asks you where is your nose, and specifically in a location like this, what you are supposed to refer is the well that your ancestors helped dig. So the deeper the well, the more is the resilience for drought, the higher is the pedigree that society infers on you. And I find that to be the most potent way of instilling any sort of change. So sorry for the long answer, but how to get communities together is doing good incentivized, whether it is financially, socially. Your good that you do, is it directly in an understandable way? You understand that if I do this is how it's going to benefit me directly. And then how do you set that, layering it through culture, through storytelling? That is the only way I feel that communities can work. The other way, which is a draconian way, it is straight policies, which I suppose does not work in the long term. Only policies in the long term do not work.
And I want the rest of the panel to respond to that, because I did warn the organizers, I will bring this up, COP28 that we copped out of, where we've said, effectively, India has said that the policy of phasing out coal and stopping our investment in coal is not something India is comfortable with. And this is a stated policy. But at the end of the day, a lot of what we're doing in India, where we say, hey, you know what, we're going to now switch to electric vehicles, but our electricity comes from coal, which is not clean. And so we're going around in circles where we're polluting somewhere. We're hurting the environment in some part, but we're just doing it in such a way that it's not in front of our faces, so we don't feel so bad about it. How much of this, and if you want to take this first, Madhav, how much of this needs to be regulation, and how much of this needs to be a reward that is perhaps more legacy, more, altruistic?
See, this is a complicated problem, right? I mean, we've been doing work in Jharkhand. 90% of Jharkhand's economy is coal. Yeah. What about if we stop coal today? What happens to the people who are carrying? There are people. 30% of the jobs are people who drive trucks, who carry the coal from the mines to the train stations. Right? So I think what you have to understand, I think in many ways we're doing the right things. We're on the track to tripling our renewable energy. Bigger challenges are how we integrate that. How do we do battery storage? So I'm not, but at the same time, I think we have to take into cognizance that this phasing out of coal and, this construct of, not including fossil fuels, all fossil fuels in the conversation is all sort of very, very important. I think in our context, I think, we have, again, if you see what you're seeing is the southern states, which are economically stronger, have done better on renewables. Again, are we going to drive a different kind of inequity through this conversation? So I think in a way, the stance that we are taking, and this is where this idea of choosing your own path. So I think the net zero by 2070 is a good commitment. We've done modeling that shows that itself is going to be a 65% reduction from business as usual. I think just achieving that will actually help India do wonders. And I think if that means that we're not going to phase out coal by 2030, I think that's a choice we are making to our path. Similarly, this policy trickles down, right? At the state, when we talk about CBDR, this common but differentiated, even within the states, right? We have the responsibility towards Jharkhand. We have the responsibility towards Odisha. So I think So the point is, I think that's the response on that whole thing, right? It's not that I think we need to build our own path. We have to stay committed to it. We have to do all the things that is necessary to make that happen. But now, if we have set this target of getting to net zero by 2070, I think it's a good one. And we're going to have to move mountains to get there. So I think let's focus and do the best we can do around that. Is sort of what my opinion.
Mr. Godrej, we're also given to understand that customers who buy products are happier to buy products from companies that are more aware, that are doing more for sustainability. In fact, some research says customers might even be willing to pay more for a sustainable product. Is that enough incentive? Because in a country like India, a large portion of our audience is price conscious. If we were to phase out coal, it would make electricity perhaps unviable for many of our people who are only now understanding the joys of electricity. How do we bring the rest of our population on board?
Just to put what Madhav said, which is really very relevant, but to put it in context, we are growing at 6 to 7%, right? The demand for energy in India is growing exponentially. On top of that, what Madhav just talked about cooling, with a warming planet. So, unfortunately or fortunately that we have growth. Unfortunately that our growth is going to be fed by coal power, because that's the only thing we have. Okay? So, I think what we have to do, the only way you're going to be able to start phasing coal down is by very, very rapidly moving to renewables. So, what we should really be talking about is what are the roadblocks to doing that rapidly. Why can't we do it 3 times, 4 times the rate we're doing it today? What's holding it back? That would be a good conversation. Why is it that we are not able to do it? It's not that we are not doing solar or wind, etc. But the pace at which we have to do it is enormous now. So because of this, it's a good problem to have growth, right? We would all be crying if our growth was 3%. So I think we have to put it in context. The second thing is that, we have become quite dependent on especially China for solar panels. Yes, the government have sort of rolled out all sorts of schemes to change that. But until that changes, you're still dependent on someone else. So we need to get, very strong in being able to make windmills, in being able to make solar panels, in all the other things that are required. Because it's not just the generating part. Okay, you need transmission lines, you need policies between states, you need a way to connect states and manage the grid, in a very sort of difficult situation where you have constant changing sources of energy. And you add nuclear energy to that. I mean, we have nuclear energy, but it's barely 2%. So I think we have to look at how we can increase renewables really rapidly. And that is a big challenge that WRI and others are all looking at as to what are the roadblocks. Why is it that we are not able to do? Now, he mentioned Tamil Nadu, in the south, why they have wonderful energy systems when the monsoons are there, both the southwest and northeast monsoon. They have plenty of energy, which they can sell to others. Rest of the time, they have to buy from someone else. So this is what the complication comes. You have to be able to manage that. So I think that that's a big, big driver. Coming to the second part of your comment on customers, I think, to my mind, I think Germany is the only country where consumers are willing to pay more for something extraordinary. I don't think in India that is the case. No. I think in India, people still want value for money, but at the same time, they want to see something different, something new, something that is attractive to the customer. But to expect that they will pay more because it's somewhat more sustainable, I think is, at this stage of our development, I don't think. And besides, you may get 1% of the population or less who may be interested in that idea that, this is more sustainable. 99% will not. So I would not bank on that at all. I think what companies have to do is to show that they are in every way, in their products, in their processes, they present themselves in a credible way on sustainability, because as you well know, there's a lot of greenwashing has been around the world, and we don't want to get into that trap. So that's where standards come in. Standards are a very good way, A, to avoid greenwashing, B, to create a level playing field for everyone. So say in home appliances, now we have standards for cooling products, etc. That's a very good way for consumers to know what they are getting. So you don't take them for a ride. If I say mine is the best, you say yours is the best, how is the consumer to decide? Somebody's got to be the empire and put in the standards, right?
Go ahead. I know you want to put in an input on this as well.
Yes.
You're learning on the ground from that relationship of a price conscious or a cost conscious citizen, buying into the fact that this is something that's important that needs to get done.
But before I answer that, I would just like to button a bit. So yes, moving to renewables is a non-option. It's a necessity, it's a non-option. But I think that we can keep on increasing our production by going to renewable, but till we reimagine consumption, there is no end to it. We can get to grow more food, produce more energy, but till we reimagine consumption, that is not possible. And reimagining consumption is not by giving someone a moral lesson. Reimagining consumption is not by hoping that people will pay for something good, but reimagining consumption can be done on a systemic level. And from the little that I have learned from working in areas which are sort of extreme, is that there is this saying in Hindi, which a friend of mine quotes very often, which is that Bhumi, which is land, has always determined and should always determine our bhasha, bhes, bhojan, bhavan, bhajan, which is that the buildings that we live in, the food that we eat, the clothes that we wear are absolutely context driven. And if we were to make that switch, make it more what people call circular, that is one perhaps way of reimagining consumption. And the delta, and as we are experiencing it, our sandbox project is huge. To give you an example, the embodied energy of using concrete in Jaipur on this specific site versus using fired bricks versus using cement stabilized earth blocks, the energy difference, embodied energy differentiation is not even, it's more than 1/10. It's 1/10 is this, and they are So if I was to extrapolate that across what is the best food that can be grown in this region which has the lowest environmental cost, what is the best way of building homes that give the maximum thermal efficiencies by the methods that they are built, by the materials that are used, uh, in that are the most carbon efficient and ensures maximum self-sufficiency to those community. What are the ways that we should seed commerce in specific areas that leverage one of the most underutilized resource, culture, creativity, human potential, to create developmental narratives that bring self-sufficiency to those communities without costing them their environments or identities? That may be one way of looking at reimagining consumption. It has worked for the past 5,000 years. It may likely work going further. And I'm sorry, in all of this, I forgot what the question was.
How do we bring a more price-conscious citizen on board to, to buying into the idea of sustainability, to, changing the way we consume, to asking those questions?
By just being, the consumer will always look for value for money. It's simple. In a country where 600 million people survive on less than $2 a day, to even have that conversation, it's like blasphemous in a manner of speaking. So I would say that, think of the Tesla example. Electric cars are good, we knew it for the past 30 years, but someone came and I said that, and that person said that I'm going to give you a car that is faster than the fastest sports car in the world, created an aspiration around it, and that's when behavior changed. So I would say that if today I said, for our project specifically, I say that building out of mud or lime or stone is the best materials, but if I do not build systems and create efficiencies of scale in a way that it is truly value for money for that consumer, that's when that we can really move the needle. And just last thing, one of the things that the current capitalistic system around the world does not totally account for, at least in most part of the world, is determining the true cost of anything, the true environmental cost of something, the true intergenerational cost of something, the true social cost of something. I think that if those costs get laid down as policy as it's happening in some of the European countries, people can see this is more expensive or not. And the second thing is more really the government incentivizing private entrepreneurs to develop solutions that are context specific, that on a price efficiency point of view are as good as some other things, and that can happen by incentivization through policies. Thank you.
One last question, then I'll open it up to the audience. India is now also taking its position as the leader of the Global South. And that means that perhaps we have learnings and understandings that other countries can benefit from, because where we have the money to actually innovate, we have the ability to test it out and to figure out what works in spaces where the audience or where the citizens cannot afford too much. How much of this learning do you think India is now going to be able to impact the rest of the world with, because we have that positioning?
So I'll give you two examples. One, I mean, we always complain about a lot of things in Mumbai, but Mumbai today, if there is a 200 rain day, which is for most part of the world, with 15 million people living on 230 square feet or like square kilometer of land, we all carry on our lives. I mean, in Mumbai today has figured how to manage a 200 rain day. I mean, if it goes beyond that, then so I think there is. I mean, and what you are seeing today in Gurgaon with 25 rain day goes to a Bangalore same. So I think there's a lot to learn. I think, for example, how we have over the last 10 years built the capacity to fight like big downpours, the disaster management systems we've built, the very decentralized sort of municipal management at the ward level that gets done. I think, so there's a lot to learn. And not only, in fact, we are today in a sort of a group of 5-6 cities, including Oslo, New York, on talking about climate change. And we realized that Mumbai had more to teach on adaptation to all of these cities, because they were all thinking of very expensive, very concrete-driven solutions to manage their floods, etc. So there is a lot of learning. that we have done, building because of our circumstances, because of the kind of church. So that's one example, right? The other story that we as WR have been very closely involved in is on these whole electric buses, right? So, and this is another advantage that India had. About 2 years ago, in partnership with the Ministry of Power, we helped aggregate the demand for electric buses from 10 cities, and Government of India tried to procure 15,000 electric buses at the same time. And that gave, so India had 500 electric buses in 2020. Today they have 5,600 electric buses that are operational. 20,000 have been already contracted. We're talking about 500,000 electric buses by 2030. This is the biggest infusion of capital in public transport, bus-based public transport in India. But what they were able to do is by aggregating demand across 10 cities and like just doing 15,000 buses at one go, the prices that we got were, and the prices were not on the absolute price of the bus, but to operate it over a period of 10 years. So it moved to, using private sector to operate buses. It moved to electric mobility in one go, and we got prices that were comparable to diesel, right? So this is also the advantage is we can drive prices lower. What we did with street lights, we can drive prices lower on motors, on pumps, on boilers, all sorts of things because the demand is so large. And I think this is where we can also start to aggregate demand across probably the African continent, across Southeast Asia. And, so I think there is a big, India scale also provides a lot of opportunities where we can bring a lot of countries in the global south together with us in this journey as we sort of work on these things.
Mr. Godrej, frugal innovation from India could perhaps lead the world?
Well, I think that, we have demonstrated in a number of industries, especially in the automobile industry, that the initial demand 25 years ago was for a tiny little car. And actually, it created the entire supply ecosystem for the automobile industry because of the volume, So I think what you have to look for in India is, of course, innovation, plenty of innovation, but not just in the product. I think innovation can be everywhere. It can be in the production processes and the way you sell. There's so many ways you can do it. And we should not forget that India can be a big source of supply, and which is what happened with small cars. There was a good demand for it. So I would say that yes, frugal, but not jugaad. I think the jugaad idea, is something that it's a quick fix, but it's temporary. You see, you have to be much more thoughtful in being able to do things that are, long-term, sustainable in that sense of sustainable, but also be eco-friendly, etc., etc. So I would say that, yes, there's a lot of this going on in India, but also, don't forget that recycling is another area where India has done quite a lot. It's not that we've done nothing, but it's a lot of voluntary groups and things like that who've been involved in it. And so, let's put it this way. I think these people, whoever does innovation in whatever way, need to be encouraged. And we need to, keep on doing that because there are many, many multiple benefits.
With your permission, I'd like to take a few questions from the audience. Just raise your hand. Oh, to the lady in the front seat. We'll try and get a mic over to you.
Hello, my name is Vijay.
Okay, thank you so much. Hi, my name is Tanvi Halde and I'm an architect and urban planner. Firstly, I would like to thank all the panelists for your feedback on sustainability. My question to you is, what is the most common misconception of sustainable living and how do you tackle it?
I think there are many, many misconceptions about sustainability. It's one of the most bastardized word. I feel that if I was to tell all of you, because we have the privilege of having this conversation, if I was to tell you all that, close your eyes, imagine the person that you love the most, and you had the opportunity of designing a system, a food system, a building system, an energy production system, how are you going to design it for that person in a way that it works and in a way that it lasts? For me, that is sustainability. And I think this very simple notion that what is it that we are doing in the actions that we take, in the choices that we make, the impact of those choices, who is paying the price, and what is that price? If these two questions, if people understood it in great depth, I suppose that will be sustainability. The biggest challenge, as your question said, that what is the misnomer about sustainability, is people tend to see sustainability as a end product, whereas sustainability is in the very DNA of everything that you do. So that's my perspective.
Thank you so much.
Vijay, since I took the mic away from you.
It's okay, thank you. I'm Vijay from Chennai. I'm an entrepreneur in a vision of developing a eco-village. That too, today we have technology and that we can innovate. So my question is to the jury. What is your vision of creating an innovative, sustainable village? So I'm more focused on the rural part of India, where we all talk about the urban living, but at the same time, there is a rural area that we expect all of our presence in the rural, so it can help enhance the growth of India as well. Thank you.
Madhav, do you want to take that?
Yeah, I mean, I'll answer your question a bit. See, I think the biggest challenge for us especially is to, meaningfully engage, employ, whatever, 600-700 million people. This is, there's like, I think there's stats like 1 million 18-year-olds enter the workforce every year. We're just not able to create enough employment, right? We know AI, other things are going to take. So this is our biggest challenge. It goes back to your question also. This is our biggest challenge as a nation, maybe even as a world. So that's what. Few things we have been trying to do is, are there ways in which we can support, entrepreneurship at that level? Is there a way in which we can, if you're talking from a markets, can you bring, capital at discounted rates? So I think, how do you encourage entrepreneurship in the rural ecosystem? I think there's Manvendra has talked a lot about knowledge and the culture for innovation. So how do we leverage that? So we've recently started something called the Harit Bharat Fund, where we are trying to see how we can support restoration entrepreneurs across the country to access capital at a more discounted rate so that they can build businesses that are more successful. So that's one way of it. But today, in a way, we are uniquely positioned both with the access to data that we have created, the access to energy that we have created. We may not have built the physical infrastructure of the West, but we have built both the payments infrastructure, the banking infrastructure, and the energy infrastructure with very ingenious ways. And hopefully, I think that can spur, opportunities in the rural ecosystem in ways that have not been sort of in the past. But I think this challenge of resources, how do we sort of really, and clearly there are not going to be enough jobs there as we sort of grow as a nation in population. How do we, to what maximum extent can we create enterprise in the rural areas is the opportunity or is the problem that we need to solve.
Okay. We'll take a question from you to the lady in the front row. Okay. Thanks.
Okay, good evening. My question is to Mr. Godrej. So, I am proud of India's development, but I just want to comment and I want to ask you about the India's development model. In the morning, the statistic was shown that the poorest states we have are Bihar, Jharkhand, and Orissa. But all the resources, most of the resources are located in these states, okay? And then lot of extractive industries are also located there. So maybe some kind of resource hypothesis, resource curse hypothesis is in play in there. And the lifestyle of the people there, it is very sustainable, but they are extremely poor, poorest of the people. So this cannot be sustainable. This industrial model cannot be sustainable, that resources are located, but the people are poor. So how is the time to rethink about the capitalist model of India, industrial model?
Well, I think there's a role and a big role for capital because India has been a capital-starved country. We did not attract investment the way we should have all these 40, 50 years, So in many areas, we have been starved of capital. And our economy is more a service economy than a manufacturing economy today, or even an agricultural economy. So at a very early stage in India's development, we have become a service economy, which is what the West has been doing for many, many years. So we've missed out, on this manufacturing, the value added there. And services need a lot of education, Of course, we have plenty of educational institutions, but what we don't have is adequate skill development. So that's what would have, driven manufacturing to a large extent, but not just for India, for the world, So this is the model which China followed for 30 years, 3 decades of 15% growth is what brought China and Chinese people out of poverty. Now, we have to find some path for ourselves which can work for us in our situation, but also remember that we are very much a part of the world. And with such a large population, we will at some stage be a very large consuming nation. So we have to be able to attract investment. So I'm not so worried about, saying that we are a capitalist economy or a socialist economy or a, palm-based economy. We are all of that. But at the same time, what we need is development and growth everywhere, in every part of India. And you talked of some of the northern states, which is the problem. And typically, economists, divide India into 4 quadrants. And the south, has done extremely well, whether it's on education, on healthcare, on maternal health, on all the indicators of development have been extremely good in the south. The education levels are good in the south. This doesn't apply to the north. So I think our development model is more geographically problematic as opposed to any, ism of, whether it's capitalism or anything else.
Unfortunately, I'm being told that our time is up and we have to wrap up. But I want to thank our panelists for giving us your time and helping us understand the answers to the question of sustainability so much better, and to our audience for your questions and your patience as well. Thank you.